The blood on Carla's hands wasn't supposed to be there.
She stared at her trembling fingers and the dim glow of her laptop screen, wondering how a simple personality test could have led to this moment, standing over Dr. Vaughn's motionless body in the basement of the Blackwater Research Institute. But that was 6 days from now, and right now Carla Martinez was just a broke psychology student scrolling through research opportunities at 3:17 a.m., desperate enough to ignore every red flag that was about to destroy her life forever. The email had arrived with no sender name, just a subject line that made her heart skip. Urgent, $75,000 for 72 hours. Your psychological profile is exactly what we need. Carla's finger hovered over the delete button because legitimate research studies didn't contact participants at 3 in the morning with subject lines that sounded like scams. But her mother's cancer treatments had already drained their life savings, and the eviction notice taped to their apartment door gave them exactly 11 days to come up with rent money that didn't exist. She clicked the email open against every instinct screaming in her head. The message was eerily personal, referencing details about her life that no researcher should have known. Her mother's specific diagnosis, the exact amount they owed in medical bills, even her recent withdrawal from graduate school. Carla Martinez, age 24, psychology major, currently facing financial hardship due to family medical crisis. Your psychological assessment scores indicate exceptional suitability for our advanced personality research program. The Blackwater Research Institute's website loaded slowly, revealing only a stark black page with a single image, a modern glass building surrounded by endless forest, looking more like a prison than a research facility. No staff directory, no published studies, no contact information except a phone number with an area code she didn't recognize. But $75,000 was enough money to save her mother's life and pay for Carla to finish her degree. It was also exactly the amount they needed, down to the dollar, which should have been impossible for strangers to know. Carla spent 4 hours researching Dr. Marcus Vaughn, the supposed lead researcher, finding only a handful of academic papers about personality disorders and a photo that looked wrong somehow, like his smile had been photoshopped onto someone else's face. Every rational part of her brain insisted this was dangerous. But desperation makes people ignore obvious warnings. When she finally sent her acceptance email as dawn broke through her bedroom window, Carla told herself she was being brave and resourceful, not stupid and naive. The response came within minutes, containing plane tickets, detailed travel instructions, and a contract that was far too complex for a simple psychological study. Pages of legal terminology about intensive assessment protocols, psychological reconstruction methods, and temporary personality modification procedures that made her stomach twist with unease. One clause buried deep in the document made her hand shake. Participant acknowledges that certain experimental methods may result in permanent alterations to baseline psychological functioning. 3 days later, Carla found herself the only passenger on a private jet, flying over wilderness so vast and empty it seemed to swallow the world. The pilot hadn't spoken to her during the entire flight, and when she tried to ask about their destination, he simply handed her noise-canceling headphones and pointed at her seat. For 4 hours, she stared out the window at endless trees and mountains, seeing no signs of civilization. No roads or buildings or any indication that other humans had ever existed in this remote corner of the world. The Blackwater Research Institute materialized from the forest like something from a nightmare. All black glass and sharp angles that seemed designed to intimidate rather than welcome. As their small plane touched down on a private airstrip, Carla noticed there were no other aircraft, no vehicles in the parking area, no signs of life anywhere except for the building itself glowing against the darkening sky like a technological beacon in the wilderness. Dr. Marcus Vaughn met her at the entrance, and immediately Carla understood why his photos had looked wrong. His smile was too wide, his eyes too bright, and he moved with the fluid precision of someone who had practiced every gesture until it appeared natural. He welcomed her with the warmth of an old friend while his pale eyes catalogued every detail of her appearance, her posture, her nervous habits, as if he were memorizing her weaknesses for later use. "Welcome to Blackwater, Carla," he said, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't place. "You have no idea how long we've been waiting for someone with your particular psychological profile. The assessment you're about to undergo will change everything you think you know about human nature, starting with your own." His laugh was soft and genuinely pleased, like a collector who had just acquired a rare specimen for his private museum. The interior of the facility was even more unsettling than its exterior. All sterile white corridors lined with observation windows that showed empty rooms filled with equipment she didn't recognize. Dr. Vaughn explained that she would be the only participant for this personalized assessment protocol, which was unusual because most psychological studies required multiple subjects for statistical validity. As they descended in an elevator that went much deeper underground than seemed necessary, Carla realized she hadn't seen any other staff members, security guards, or even maintenance workers. "Your accommodation is on the residential level," Dr. Vaughn continued as the elevator opened onto what looked like an expensive hotel lobby built entirely underground. "You'll find everything you need for a comfortable stay. Though I should mention that electronic devices don't function properly at this depth. Something about the geological composition interferes with signals, so you'll be completely disconnected from the outside world until your assessment is complete." Carla's room was luxurious but windowless, with a comfortable bed, modern furniture, and a door that locked with an electronic keypad from the outside. Dr. Vaughn assured her this was for security purposes, but as his footsteps faded down the corridor, she realized she was trapped 70 feet underground, with a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes in a facility that seemed designed for purposes she was only beginning to suspect. Alone in the silence, Carla tried to convince herself she was being paranoid. $75,000 could save her mother's life, and she only had to survive 3 days of psychological testing to earn it. But as she lay in bed staring at the concrete ceiling, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just signed her own death warrant. And tomorrow, Dr. Vaughn would begin the process of destroying everything she thought she knew about herself. Carla woke to absolute silence, the kind of oppressive quiet that only exists deep underground, far from any living thing. Her digital watch had stopped working sometime during the night, leaving her with no sense of time or connection to the world above. When her door unlocked with a sharp electronic beep, she knew Dr. Vaughn was ready to begin whatever he had really brought her here to do. And it had nothing to do with standard psychological research. The assessment room was a nightmare of mirrors and monitoring equipment, designed to strip away every psychological defense mechanism a person might have built over a lifetime. Carla found herself seated in a chair positioned at the exact center of the room, surrounded by her own reflection from every angle, unable to hide from herself or from the cameras. She could see tracking her every micro-expression behind the one-way glass. The human mind is remarkably adaptable when it comes to self-deception, Dr. Vaughn began, settling into his chair with the relaxed confidence of a predator who had already trapped his prey. Most people spend their entire lives constructing elaborate lies about their own nature, convincing themselves they're fundamentally good, moral, empathetic individuals. This room is designed to strip away those comfortable illusions and reveal who you really are when survival is at stake. The question started innocuously enough. Her childhood relationships, academic performance, romantic history. But gradually, Dr. Vaughn's inquiries became surgical in their precision, probing into thoughts and impulses she had never admitted to anyone, including herself. He seemed to know exactly which psychological pressure points would make her most vulnerable, as if he had been studying her for years rather than hours. "Tell me about Maria Santos," Dr. Vaughn said suddenly, his pale eyes never leaving her face. "Your roommate during sophomore year. The one who trusted you with her deepest secrets and fears. What did you do with that information, Carla? The mirrors won't let you lie to me." Carla felt her blood turn to ice as a memory she had buried for 3 years came flooding back in vivid detail. Maria had been struggling with an eating disorder, confiding in Carla during late-night conversations about her shame and self-hatred. When Maria started dating the boy Carla had secretly wanted for months, Carla had anonymously sent screenshots of their private conversations to half their dormitory, watching from across the cafeteria as Maria's world collapsed in real time. "I destroyed her privacy because I was jealous," Carla heard herself saying, the words seeming to come from someone else. "I spread her most intimate secrets around campus until she was so humiliated she transferred schools. I watched her eating disorder get worse, watched her lose all her friends, and I felt satisfied because I thought she deserved it for taking something I wanted." Dr. Vaughn smiled with genuine pleasure, making notes on his tablet as if her confession was exactly what he had been waiting to hear. "Excellent. You're demonstrating remarkable honesty under psychological pressure. Most participants require much more intensive methods to achieve this level of self-awareness. Your narcissistic responses are well developed. Your capacity for manipulation is impressive. But it's your psychopathic potential that makes you truly special." The session continued for what felt like hours, each question designed to excavate darker and more disturbing aspects of her personality. Carla found herself admitting to thoughts and behaviors that painted a picture of someone she had never wanted to acknowledge, fantasies about her professors, failing so she could succeed, moments when she had manipulated her mother's guilt and fear to get what she wanted, times when she had felt genuine pleasure watching classmates struggle with problems she could easily solve but chose not to help with. "I think I understand now why you were specifically selected," Dr. Vaughn said finally, standing and smoothing his lab coat with obvious satisfaction. "Your psychological profile indicates an individual capable of extreme moral flexibility when properly motivated. Tomorrow we'll begin the real assessment, situational ethics testing that will determine just how far you're willing to go, and your survival depends on making the right choices." Carla felt sick as she processed what she had revealed about herself during the session. These weren't just random dark thoughts that everyone experienced. They were patterns of behavior that suggested she was capable of genuine cruelty when it served her interests. She had always considered herself a good person who cared about others, but the mirrors had forced her to confront a version of herself that was calculating, manipulative, and willing to destroy innocent people for personal gain. "I want to leave," Carla whispered, her voice barely audible in the sterile room. "I don't care about the money anymore. I just want to go home to my mother." Dr. Vaughn's expression shifted to something that might have been pity if his eyes hadn't remained completely cold. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Carla. You're here for the full 72-hour assessment period as specified in your contract. Besides, we've barely begun to explore your true potential. Tomorrow you'll discover capabilities you never knew you possessed, and by the end of your stay, you'll understand that the person who wanted to leave was weak, naive, and completely unprepared for the realities of human nature." As Dr. Vaughn led her back to her underground room, Carla caught glimpses of other assessment chambers through the observation windows, but they were all empty now, containing only cleaning supplies and equipment that looked more medical than psychological. The silence was complete except for the hum of ventilation systems and their footsteps echoing off polished floors, making her feel like the only living thing in an underground tomb. Back in her windowless cell, Carla pressed her ear against the door and listened to Dr. Vaughn's footsteps fading down the corridor. In the distance, she could hear what sounded like construction or machinery, rhythmic hammering that suggested someone was building or modifying something in the depths of the facility. She tried to convince herself it was normal maintenance work, but the sound seemed too deliberate, too purposeful, like someone preparing for an event they knew was coming. Sleep was impossible as Carla stared at the concrete ceiling and tried to process what was happening to her. Dr. Vaughn wasn't just studying her psychological responses. He was systematically breaking down her self-image and rebuilding her understanding of her own nature. Every question, every revelation, every moment of shame and recognition was designed to transform her from the person she had been into something else entirely. The terrifying part was that she was beginning to suspect he might be right about who she really was underneath all her carefully constructed self-deceptions. as the ventilation system hummed through the endless underground night. Carla wondered if her mother was lying awake in her hospital bed, worried about why her daughter hadn't called or visited in days. The thought should have filled her with guilt and determination to escape, but instead she found herself curious about what Dr. Vaughn would reveal tomorrow. What other dark aspects of her personality were waiting to be discovered and explored? Maybe the person who wanted to leave really was weak and naive, and maybe she was finally ready to meet the monster she had been hiding from her entire life. Carla's door unlocked at what she guessed was dawn, though time had become meaningless in the underground facility where fluorescent lights created an eternal artificial day. The intercom voice was different this morning, colder and more mechanical, instructing her to report to Experimental Protocol Chamber C within 15 minutes. As she walked through the sterile corridors, Carla noticed new sounds echoing from deeper in the facility. Mechanical humming, electronic beeps, and what sounded like someone screaming in the distance before being abruptly cut off. The new chamber was unlike anything she had seen before, containing sophisticated monitoring equipment, connected to a single chair that looked more like an electric chair than laboratory furniture. Thick cables ran from the seat to computer terminals lining the walls, and she could see electrodes and sensors built into the armrests and headrest. Dr. Vaughn stood beside the apparatus with an expression of barely contained excitement, like a scientist about to conduct the experiment of his career. Today we test your psychological limits under direct neural stimulation, Dr. Vaughn announced, gesturing for her to take the seat. These electrodes will monitor your brain activity while simultaneously delivering targeted electrical impulses to specific regions associated with empathy, fear, and moral reasoning. We're going to temporarily disable your capacity for normal emotional responses and observe how your decision-making process changes when you're freed from the burden of human conscience. Carla backed away from the chair, every instinct screaming that this had gone far beyond any legitimate psychological research. "This is illegal," she said, her voice shaking with terror and rage. "You can't perform medical procedures without proper consent and oversight. I want to contact a lawyer. I want to call my mother. I want out of this place right now." Dr. Vaughn's smile widened as he activated something on his tablet, and Carla felt the room's atmosphere change as hidden speakers began emitting a low-frequency hum that made her feel dizzy and disoriented. "Your contract specifically authorizes experimental neurological assessment methods. Carla, you signed away your right to refuse any procedures I deem necessary for accurate psychological evaluation. The beauty of this location is that we're completely beyond the reach of any legal or ethical oversight." The humming sound intensified, and Carla realized it was some kind of sonic weapon designed to incapacitate subjects who became uncooperative. Her vision began to blur as the frequency disrupted her inner ear, making it impossible to maintain her balance or focus on escape routes. Dr. Vaughn approached her with practiced movements. Clearly experienced in subduing resistant participants, his hands already reaching for restraints she hadn't noticed attached to the walls. "The fascinating thing about human psychology," Dr. Vaughn said conversationally as he secured her arms, is how quickly moral flexibility develops when survival is threatened. Right now, you're horrified by what I'm doing to you, but in a few hours, you'll understand that this is simply the natural order of things. Strong individuals take what they need from weaker ones, and empathy is just an evolutionary mistake that prevents people from achieving their full potential. As the electrodes made contact with her skull, Carla felt her thoughts becoming clearer and more focused than they had ever been before. The constant background noise of guilt, empathy, and emotional attachment that had shaped her entire life suddenly went quiet, leaving her mind free to process information with cold, logical precision. She could still remember caring about her mother, worrying about other people's feelings, feeling guilty about past actions, but those concerns seemed distant and irrelevant now, like childhood fears she had outgrown. "How do you feel?" Dr. Vaughn asked, studying the readouts from her brain scan with obvious fascination. "Can you describe the changes in your thought processes?" "Clearer," Carla replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "It's like I've been thinking through fog my entire life, and now I can finally see everything with perfect clarity. All those emotional responses that used to cloud my judgment are gone, and I can make decisions based purely on logical self-interest. It's liberating." Dr. Vaughn nodded with satisfaction as he made notes about her responses. "Excellent. Now I want you to consider a hypothetical scenario. Imagine you could save your mother's life, but doing so would require you to kill an innocent stranger who has done nothing wrong. Before the treatment, your emotional conditioning would have made this choice agonizing. How does it feel to contemplate now?" Carla considered the question with the same detached interest she might apply to a math problem. The stranger was irrelevant to her goals and survival, while her mother represented both emotional attachment and practical utility. The choice was obvious when stripped of sentimental complications. "I would kill the stranger without hesitation," she said. "Their life has no value to me, while my mother's survival serves my interests." The decision is simple when you remove irrational emotional interference. "Perfect," Dr. Vaughn murmured, his pale eyes bright with excitement. "You're responding even better than I predicted." Most subjects require several sessions to achieve this level of psychological clarity. Now, here's where things get interesting. The scenario I just described isn't hypothetical. There's a security guard upstairs who doesn't know about our research. His death would ensure that no one ever discovers what happens in this facility, which would protect both of us from legal consequences. Are you prepared to take the next step in your psychological evolution? The logical part of Carla's enhanced mind understood that Dr. Vaughn was manipulating her, using the neural stimulation to suppress her moral reasoning while amplifying her capacity for violence. But the emotional understanding of why this manipulation was wrong had been temporarily severed, leaving her able to recognize the technique without caring about its implications. She was becoming exactly what he wanted her to become, and the most disturbing part was how natural it felt. "Yes," she heard herself saying, though part of her mind was screaming in horror at the word. If eliminating the guard serves our mutual interests and ensures my mother receives her treatment, then it's the rational choice. When do we begin?" Dr. Vaughn stood and began disconnecting the monitoring equipment, his movements quick and efficient. "Right now. The guard makes his rounds every 2 hours, and he'll be passing through the maintenance level in exactly 12 minutes. I'll provide you with the tools and access codes you'll need. Remember, Carla, you're not becoming a monster. You're finally becoming honest about what human beings really are when they stop lying to themselves about morality and empathy." As they left the experimental chamber together, Carla felt a strange sense of partnership with Dr. Vaughn that she knew should have disgusted her, but instead felt perfectly natural. He had freed her from the burden of caring about people who didn't matter, and now she could focus entirely on achieving her goals without being held back by irrational guilt or empathy. The person she had been this morning seemed weak and naive compared to the focused, capable individual she was becoming. The maintenance level was dimly lit and filled with the mechanical sounds that had been echoing through the facility since her arrival. Dr. Vaughn handed her a maintenance uniform and a key card, explaining that the guard would be alone and unsuspecting when he made his routine check of the equipment rooms. All she had to do was approach him normally, engage him in casual conversation, and then strike when his attention was diverted. It was simple, logical, and completely necessary for their continued success. As Carla changed into the uniform and prepared for what she was about to do, she wondered briefly what her mother would think of the person her daughter was becoming. But the thought passed quickly, replaced by cold anticipation for the task ahead. Dr. Vaughn had given her a gift more valuable than $75,000. He had shown her who she really was when all the social conditioning and emotional programming was stripped away. She was finally free to be the predator she had always been meant to be, and tonight she would prove it by taking her first life. Carla stood over the security guard's body in the maintenance corridor, watching the blood pool around his head as Dr. Vaughn checked his pulse with clinical detachment. The neural stimulation had worn off 3 hours ago, and the full horror of what she had done was crashing over her in waves that left her shaking and nauseated. But it was too late for regret now. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and Dr. Vaughn's satisfied smile told her this had always been his intended outcome. "Remarkable recovery time," Dr. Vaughn murmured as he made notes about her psychological state. Most subjects experience complete dissociation for at least 12 hours after their first kill. Your ability to process trauma and guilt while maintaining functional behavior suggests an exceptionally adaptive personality structure. You're going to be very valuable to my clients. The word clients hit Carla like a physical blow as the full scope of her situation became clear. This hadn't been a psychological research study offering $75,000 to desperate graduate students. She had been systematically groomed, psychologically conditioned, and neurologically manipulated by someone who specialized in creating killers for people who could afford to pay for that service. The Blackwater Research Institute was a factory for manufacturing monsters, and she had just become their newest product. The facility you're standing in doesn't officially exist. Dr. Vaughn continued, leading her away from the body toward an elevator she hadn't seen before. My real name is Dr. Jonathan Cross, and for the past 15 years I've been perfecting methods for rapid psychological reconstruction. Governments, corporations, and private individuals hire me to create operatives who can perform tasks that normal people find psychologically impossible. Congratulations, Carla. You've just graduated. The elevator descended to a level even deeper than her residential quarters, opening onto a sophisticated operations center filled with computer monitors, weapon storage, and detailed files on dozens of individuals. Carla saw her own photograph prominently displayed alongside psychological profiles, family information, and what appeared to be a complete dossier covering every aspect of her life since childhood. She had been studied, analyzed, and selected for this program long before she ever received that first email. Your mother's cancer was real, Dr. Cross explained, settling into a chair behind the main computer terminal. But her insurance company didn't randomly deny coverage. I arranged for their rejection because desperate people make the best candidates for psychological reconstruction. Your love for her was the perfect motivation to override your natural moral inhibitions. And now that we've demonstrated your willingness to kill for her survival, she's no longer necessary to maintain your cooperation. Carla felt the world spinning around her as she processed this information. Her mother's suffering had been orchestrated as part of her recruitment process, designed to create the exact emotional vulnerability that would make her susceptible to Dr. Cross's manipulation. Every choice she had made over the past week, every moral compromise and psychological breakthrough, had been carefully planned and executed by someone who understood exactly how to break down human resistance. The beautiful irony, Dr. Cross continued, clearly enjoying her psychological destruction, is that your first assignment will be to eliminate your mother. My client needs to test your operational reliability, and what better way to measure your commitment than having you kill the person you supposedly love most? Don't worry about feeling guilty. We'll use the neural stimulation to suppress your empathy during the mission, just like we did with the security guard. Something fundamental shifted inside Carla's mind as she stared at Dr. Cross's satisfied expression. The rage that flooded through her was unlike anything she had experienced during the neural conditioning. This was pure, focused hatred directed at the man who had systematically destroyed everything she cared about. But underneath the fury was something even more dangerous, the cold, calculating intelligence he had awakened in her during their sessions together. You made a critical error in your psychological assessment, Carla said, her voice steady despite the volcanic anger building in her chest. You assumed that breaking me would make me controllable, but psychopaths aren't controlled by other people. They use whatever tools and opportunities are available to eliminate threats to their survival. And right now, Dr. Cross, you're the biggest threat in my world. Dr. Cross's expression shifted from satisfaction to concern as he realized that Carla's transformation had exceeded his ability to predict or control it. She was no longer the desperate graduate student who had arrived seeking money for her mother's treatment. The neural conditioning, psychological manipulation, and systematic trauma had created something far more dangerous than he had intended. A focused, intelligent predator with nothing left to lose and very specific targets for her newly awakened capacity for violence. Carla moved toward the weapons storage with fluid, predatory grace, her enhanced understanding of human psychology allowing her to read Dr. Cross's growing fear in his micro-expressions and body language. He reached for an emergency button on his desk, but she was already anticipating his movements, her hand closing around a tactical knife from the display case with practiced efficiency. "Thank you for the education, Dr. Cross," Carla said, testing the blade's balance with the expertise she had somehow acquired during her psychological reconstruction. "You taught me that empathy is weakness, that manipulation is a tool, and that some people deserve whatever happens to them. You also showed me that I'm capable of extraordinary things when properly motivated. Unfortunately for you, my primary motivation right now is making sure you never hurt another innocent person." Dr. Cross fumbled for a weapon of his own, but Carla had already identified his movement patterns and psychological tells during their sessions together. She understood him better than he understood himself, having been forced to learn every aspect of predatory behavior from someone who had perfected it over decades. The student had become the master, and now it was time for the final examination. "Wait," Dr. Cross gasped, backing against the wall as Carla approached with calm determination. "You don't understand what you're destroying. This program has created hundreds of operatives for national security purposes. The research we've conducted here will revolutionize psychological treatment for trauma victims, soldiers with PTSD, anyone who needs to overcome emotional barriers to function in high-stress situations." Carla paused, studying his face with the analytical skills he had taught her to use. "You're lying," she said simply. "Your micro-expressions indicate deception, your breathing pattern shows panic, and your attempt to rationalize this program reveals that you know exactly how evil it is. You create killers for money, Dr. Cross. Nothing more, nothing less. And now you're going to discover what it feels like to be on the receiving end of your own psychological experiment." What happened next would haunt Carla for the rest of her life, but not because she felt guilty about killing Dr. Cross. The neural conditioning had permanently altered her capacity for empathy, leaving her able to recognize right from wrong intellectually while feeling no emotional connection to moral behavior. She had become exactly what he intended to create, a functional psychopath capable of extreme violence when it served her purposes. But as she stood over his body in the underground operations center, Carla realized that her transformation was incomplete. Dr. Cross had given her the tools and knowledge to be a perfect predator, but he had also created someone capable of using those abilities for her own purposes rather than his clients'. She was free now, truly free for the first time in her life, and she had very specific plans for how to use the education he had provided. The facility's computer systems contained detailed information about every client, every operation, every innocent person who had been psychologically destroyed in service of the program Dr. Cross had built. Carla spent the next 6 hours systematically downloading files, memorizing names and addresses. learning everything she could about the network of individuals who paid for psychological reconstruction services. By the time she was finished, she had a comprehensive list of targets for the rest of her operational career. If this psychological horror story left you questioning how far you would go to save someone you love, you need to hit that subscribe button right now, because we're just getting started with these mind-bending thrillers. Smash that notification bell, because next week we're diving into the true story of a therapist who discovered her patients weren't just sharing their darkest secrets. They were confessing to unsolved murders. Drop a comment below and tell us, do you think you could resist the kind of psychological manipulation Carla faced, or would you have become the sane monster she did? Share this video if psychological thrillers keep you awake at night, and don't forget to like if you want more stories about the darkness hiding inside the human mind. Trust me, after what we've got planned for next week, you'll never look at psychology the same way again.